So our next presentation is a virtual participant, Laura, and Laura, just check your chat. We'll be kind of giving you your time frames. So you have 15 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good morning, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here with you virtually. Sad that I'm not there in person. I was really hoping to be, but glad I could still participate. Hopefully you can see my screen. So I'm actually presenting two different studies this morning on a pollinator-friendly roadside project that we're working on here in Florida, along with a number of my collaborators here. I do want to acknowledge that the Disney Conservation Fund has supported this work. So we're talking about roadsides, and it's really interesting to me that roads have just absolutely exploded. They've been called the largest human artifact on Earth. And that comes along with urbanization and a lot of ecological implications. From the years 2010 to 2050, global road coverage is expected to increase 60%, which is enough to encircle the planet over 600 times. So there is just a ton of potential space. But I'm not here to talk about the ecological side. As a social scientist, I'm really interested in people and what people do, what they support, what they don't support. Oh, thank you. I am so thrilled to see you all now. That's great. Thank you. Managing roadsides to support wildlife, including pollinators, depends on public support. For these spaces. There have been documented cases where departments of transportation have changed their management to be more wildlife friendly and pollinator friendly. And when the public didn't support it, they went back to their old way that was not ecologically desirable. So the human side, the human piece of this puzzle is really critical. So there's a lot of opportunity in these linear landscapes. But we don't know a lot about what people think about these spaces. So that's where this project came in. Because if people aren't going to support pollinator-friendly roadsides, the potential impact is really limited. So really need to understand the human dimensions. Okay, so I'm presenting the Disney Conservation Fund supported two surveys that were conducted last year, and I have two back-to-back presentations. So my first one is going to align with the first survey, and then in the next one, I'll tell you about the second one. So the first survey, we collected data from just over 1,000 Florida residents, 18 years of age and older. We used a quota sample to make sure our sample reflected the actual population. And we defined for folks that pollinator-friendly roadsides are highly visible landscapes that can provide habitat and otherwise support pollinators and various wildlife. Now, this first survey was intended to just assess some really basic information. So we wanted to figure out, what do Florida drivers know about pollinator-friendly roadsides? We wanted to learn about their preferred communication methods, and we wanted to capture other types of perceptions and concerns associated with these underutilized spaces. Now, Florida does not have a formal pollinator-friendly roadside program. Myself and my collaborators are hoping that this work will inform future communications in this space. Okay, so I don't have my instrument here due to the short length of the presentation, and I am going to jump right in to some of our findings. So, we'll start with educational preferences and knowledge. So we asked people what their awareness and knowledge pertaining to different aspects of pollinator-friendly roadsides was. And these areas they could range all the way up from 1.0 all the way up to 5. So the highest awareness that people reported had to do with ecological benefits, followed by socioeconomic benefits. and then kind of went down from there. Patterns of migratory pollinators that can use roadsides. And then when it came to management, those were the areas that folks believe they knew the least about, not surprisingly. How roadside management decisions are made related to safety, funding, and staffing was the very lowest. So this is self-reported perceived knowledge. And then we gave kind of a 5-question quiz to assess actual knowledge. And out of these 5, just over half of folks achieved a perfect score, excuse me. And the one that the highest number of people got right was pollinator-friendly roadsides provide food and other resources for insect pollinators. And people did pretty well on this, but the one that they had the most difficult time with had to do with diversity. So talking about abundant grasses and wildflowers managed appropriately provide the best insect pollinator habitat. The fewest number of Florida drivers knew that this was correct. So, okay, so next, if you remember, we're talking about hoping to inform communications in the future. So we asked folks, how would you like to learn about pollinator-friendly roadsides? And there was a range here, but the number one most preferred method was demonstration gardens at welcome centers and rest stops. And the second most preferred method was road signs. And it's kind of interesting because road signs, and this has come up in our other studies, tends to come above billboards, which you might kind of think they're sort of the same thing, but people seem to prefer road signs. Social media is often also up there. Some of the lowest things that are not as preferred would be e-newsletters, radio announcements, mailed flyers. So they really kind of seem to want to learn about these spaces as part of their journey through welcome centers, rest stops, and road signs. Now, for the people who said that they preferred social media, we asked them which specific outlets they would want to learn about pollinator-friendly roadsides through. And the number one choice was YouTube, followed by Facebook and Instagram. Snapchat and X, or formerly Twitter, were not as preferred by folks. So I think the YouTube response is really interesting because if you think about people want to learn as they're driving along the roadsides, that YouTube represents kind of a way that we can sort of replicate that journey. So we can provide a almost like a digital twin to that driving experience. Okay, so this is a kind of a snapshot of how people would like to learn about pollinator-friendly roadsides. And then we'll get into a couple perceptions and concerns. So we shared a series of 8 items, or no, I'm sorry, there's more than 8 here. I think we have 10, that were of varying degree of importance related to pollinator-friendly roadsides. And the items that drivers indicated were the most important to them were the ecological benefits and the environmental benefits. Really interesting to me is that the lowest rated one is aesthetics, because this tends to be a pretty hot topic when it comes to landscape preferences. So aesthetics is down at the bottom here. Also up at the top, agricultural benefits, sustainability, and benefits to my well-being fell kind of towards the bottom. So it was sort of interesting here. Now, we also asked about people's concerns associated with pollinator-friendly roadsides. And what you see across the screen here is the percentage of people who indicated they were concerned with each of these elements. The very top most concerning item was increasing vehicle collisions with wildlife. And this is really interesting because as far as we know, according to the literature, this type of roadside management does not increase vehicle collisions with deer or other large wildlife. So that's kind of interesting. And then the second highest area of concern is affecting taxpayer expenses. And this is another one that I think there's an area to correct misperceptions because a lot of times this type of management actually represents financial savings. So two areas here we could really address. And next couple here, bringing undesirable wildlife to roadsides, affecting safety, and seasons of overgrowth and unsightly plants along roadsides. But here we're getting to less than 50% of the people that are concerned with these elements. So this is kind of giving us a sort of a glimpse into the perceptions of what drivers are thinking and how we can communicate to really improve support for these spaces in the future. So just kind of bringing this piece together, this was the first survey in a series of surveys. And what we've kind of gathered so far is that knowledge pertaining to pollinator-friendly roadsides is pretty high, but there are some really mixed perceptions. So there's a lot of positive feelings related to the ecology and environmental benefits that these spaces can offer. There are concerns with safety and increased expenses. So from an education and communication standpoint, we can emphasize those elements that people really value while correcting misperceptions and addressing some of those barriers and concerns people have. And that's going to be the way to get to the greatest level of public support in the future as we create more of these pollinator-friendly roadsides and change management. So I really think that communications need to be an immersive educational experience for drivers and passengers. So people, they don't want to read about these spaces and their benefits when they're in their office or at home. They really want to learn when they're out on the road and maybe they see a beautiful wildflower planting that's in bloom. They want to learn there. And maybe the next best option is if they can watch some videos to experience what those spaces are like and the benefits they provide. There's a lot more work that needs to be done. So we actually have created a series of messages based on these findings, and they're pretty. They reflect the colors of Florida wildflowers, and they emphasize different elements of pollinator-friendly roadsides, such as the beauty, the ecological benefits. There's another one that emphasizes pollination for local farms. So a lot of different areas that we can emphasize, and we did do some message testing, which is outside the scope of this presentation, but a lot of need for message testing to really confirm the best way to communicate about these spaces to increase public support. And there's also a lot of opportunity to bring in behavioral theory and psychology research to understand people's perceptions on an even deeper level to ultimately get the public engaged. And I know that I should have time for questions, but my email is up here as well if anyone would like to follow up with me in that way. Thank you.
But we do have time for some questions. And Laura, I'll read them, I'll say them aloud.
I'm curious when the report will be published. It sounds like it's an ongoing study right now.
Laura, when will the report be published? It sounds like it's an ongoing study, but do you have a timeline?
Yeah, let me see. We have like four papers out of this study, and some of them are closer than others. This particular one, I think is actually pretty close as far as the journal article. So I don't want to jinx myself, but pretty soon, like maybe the next month, it would be out there, hopefully.
Yeah.
Um, how did you decide to design the survey to, was there like a specific group of people or, yeah, how what was the process?
Uh, Laura, how did y'all decide who to send the survey to?
So I do a lot of survey research, and I work with a professional survey sampling company that helps to connect potential participants with my studies. And I mean, really, we were looking for information from anyone who lived in Florida that was 18 years or older. But then we also, the gold standard would be if I could send a random sample, like to every household in Florida, or a random sample of those. But we use quota sampling. So we set a number of parameters based on the most recent census to make sure that our sample wasn't overrepresented by any one group and did reflect the actual Florida population.
Thank you. We have time for one more.
I noticed that FDOT is not a collaborator on this project. What is the plan in the future for using and applying this information?
It was noticed that FDOT is not a partner listed on this, and so kind of what's the future for collaboration and implementation of this project?
Yeah, that's a great question. And they are very interested in this research. My collaborator, the PI on the Disney grant, Dr. Jaret Daniels, works very closely with them, and so they're interested in some of the findings. They're very interested in the message testing we've been doing, but we've definitely been in communication about what we're learning and how this can be used in the future. And I think it was actually conversations between our PI and FDOT that sort of spurred this research.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
All right, we'll gear up our next presentation from Laura.
Thank you very much. So I kept it all in one file, so hopefully this will work. Okay, so thank you. I'm here again, and I am reporting for this piece on some findings from the second survey in this program. So I'm going to try not to repeat anything that I've already said. So we've already kind of talked about really just the incredible opportunity there is for pollinator-friendly roadsides. And, do want to emphasize again that there's really limited available research and data available to inform communication campaigns. And a lot of times communicating in the wrong way is worse than not communicating at all. So really important. And a major weakness in some communication initiatives is treating a massive audience as just kind of a single public. So that's kind of where this piece of the research comes from. There's a lot of variability and people they're not the same. There's a lot of differences in how people respond to education and messages. So with this survey, which had about 1,050 Floridians, we wanted to identify segments for future communications. And it was a second survey later in 2024, last year, pretty much same methodology, but different information collected and different analysis. And what we wanted to do is identify segments within the broader audience using attitudes, stages of change, driving habits, knowledge, willingness to support pollinator-friendly roadsides, and perceived pros and cons. So just mention one model that we use to understand behavior presents behavior not as a black and white thing, but a process. And we brought that in here. And it basically explains that behavior happens in stages. So when it comes to a person navigating potentially supporting pollinator-friendly roadsides, whether you're talking voting for policies or volunteering at a planting event, they go through these stages where first, they're not thinking about it at all. It's not on their radar. That's pre-contemplation. Then they might, given raised awareness, move into this contemplation stage where they're not committed to becoming involved, but they're thinking about it. After that, if they think it's a good thing, they're going to prepare to take action. So they might sign up to volunteer or learn what they need to do to vote. After that, that's the action stage, which is what we typically look at as the actual behavior. Ideally, somebody will engage in the behavior and move on to the last stage, which is maintenance, which is continuing to do that desirable behavior. So just a few descriptive pieces of information from the study. When we measured attitude pertaining to these spaces, and it was pretty positive. On a scale from -2 to +2, it was approaching 0.9. So people think pollinator-friendly roadsides are pretty good. The When it comes to driving on a weekly basis, our respondents, about 50% of their driving was urban or city. Then we asked people what they were willing to do to support pollinator-friendly roadsides. And the thing they were very most likely to do was to vote for policies that support them. The next couple things were expressing support to local decision makers and encouraging friends and family to support these spaces. So we asked people what the pros they perceived in pollinator-friendly roadsides was. The things that were most important were, let me see, the very top one was protecting natural resources like water, environmental benefits, doing the right thing, and benefiting Florida's agricultural economy. Now, the biggest perceived cons had to do with increased vehicle collisions, the cost for taxpayers, and driver passenger safety. And if you were here for the previous presentation, that kind of mirrors what we found in that survey as well. So our knowledge, when we asked about how much people drove, almost 60% said they drove less than 100 miles a week. The knowledge level pertaining to these spaces, people reported the largest proportion said they weren't knowledgeable at all. The stage of change that they most aligned with was pre-contemplation, meaning they're not even thinking about supporting these spaces. So we used a statistical analysis to put all of these variables together and create groups that were going to be as different from one another as possible, with the individuals within each group being as similar as possible. So what we found was 4 individual segments within the data using what I just shared with you. And I'll go through these 4 and kind of describe their characteristics. But we have the pollinator patrons, the positive pollinator passerbys, the pollinator ponderers, and the pollinator advocates in waiting. It's a lot of data. I'm not going to go into this. I'm just going to jump right into the summaries about each of our segments. So our segment 4, which was almost 30%, we named the pollinator advocates in waiting. And this group, if you think back to the stages of behavior, they were in this space where they are ready. They're preparing to support pollinator-friendly roadsides. So there's a lot of potential here. They have really positive attitudes. And because of these couple things, they're likely the people who are most inclined to engage in support of these spaces with minimal additional encouragement. So they're not active right now, but with a little support, they could be some pretty important advocates. So they said they were most motivated by things such as plant diversity, environmental benefits, and pollination provided for local farms. And they were most concerned with potential vehicle collisions with wildlife and driver passenger safety. So ideally, we want to reach this 30% of the audience and emphasize the benefits that they value while addressing their biggest barriers. So the next segment was about 24% of the population. They had kind of neutral attitudes, and they're somewhat willing to support pollinator-friendly roadsides, and they're thinking about taking action. So they're aware of pollinator-friendly roadsides, and they're thinking about it. They haven't committed to doing anything yet. So we think they may represent the second priority out of the larger audience. Um, so their biggest barriers to supporting these spaces is that they said they fear wildlife, and they also dislike wildlife. So this is kind of interesting. You can see it's a different set of barriers, kind of a different place in terms of behavior. And a great starting point for conversation with this group would be what they reported as their greatest motivators, which is feeling connected to where they live and having an opportunity to see pollinators. So we could address that with them while addressing their fear and dislike of wildlife. Now, the third priority out of these segments, I would say, is the pollinator patrons. This is the smallest percentage of the overall audience, not surprisingly, about 11%. And this is the group that's engaged. They're actively supporting this type of initiative. So they're probably a lower priority for education and communication because they're already doing this desirable behavior. They're out there, they're actively supporting these spaces. Um, so they could be a group who can serve as champions to help shape broader social norms surrounding pollinator-friendly roadsides. And but they might need some additional assistance and reinforcement, reminders of accomplishments that what we've accomplished with these spaces. And their biggest concerns had to do with the impact of pollinator-friendly roadsides on above-ground power lines and not seeing or believing the benefits of pollinator-friendly roadsides, which is interesting because this is the group who they said they're actively supporting these spaces. Then we have one final segment. Um, which we named the pollinator passerbys. This is 37%, so the largest group. And interestingly, they reported positive attitudes around pollinator-friendly roadsides, but they are not interested in being involved. So not thinking about it, they're going to be the toughest group to reach. I do think we have an opportunity to raise awareness about pollinator decline with this group and benefits of pollinator-friendly roadsides, but this is going to be when we have enough resources, time, staffing, money to reach this group. So they're not thinking about change. They rated the benefits of these spaces lower than the other groups, not surprisingly. Their greatest motivators was potential cost savings for taxpayers and supporting their well-being and the natural control of pests these spaces provide. And their biggest this group is most deterred by the cost for taxpayers and not knowing enough about pollinator-friendly roadsides. So you have potential cost savings and potential cost of this type of maintenance being the biggest barriers and benefits, respectively. So, given their interest with cost, the specifics of a roadside's expenses and cost savings may be really helpful to share to get them thinking about supporting pollinator-friendly roadsides. So there's a lot of information in this study. This is just kind of a taste, but a segmented approach is really, really effective, but it takes a lot of planning, it takes a lot of data, it takes a lot of resources. So regardless of whether a segmented approach is feasible, first steps for communicating to improve support of pollinator-friendly roadsides can include taking steps to improve visibility of these spaces and how they're managed, providing education and support for these spaces such as signage and displays at rest stops. And like I already mentioned, signage, fact sheets, talking points, should address the top overall concerns, which, if you remember from the overall audience, was vehicle collisions, costs for taxpayers, and driver and passenger safety. And we also want to amplify the benefits that they value most. So if we're looking at the overall audience, that was protecting natural resources like water, environmental benefits, doing the right thing, benefiting the agricultural economy, and providing pollination for local farms. So we're learning a lot about this audience, a lot to learn still, but I think we're really just starting to scratch the surface of the role of public attitudes, knowledge, and behaviors, and how that can play into overall addressing pollinator decline. So as a whole, this group was not super knowledgeable and demonstrated not much inclination to support pollinator-friendly roadsides. But within the audience, we identified these four segments with varying public support. And this can give us guidance for targeted strategies to promote biodiversity conservation in these underutilized spaces. And it gives us kind of almost a roadmap of the different types of education and communication we need to provide. And the stage of change that we applied to this study aligned really well with people's attitudes and their behaviors and the pros and cons that they reported. And so, altogether, looking at these segments and the information that individuals provided can really provide us with a deeper understanding of an audience that we might otherwise look at as a uniform entity. So, we don't want to communicate with a single message, but ideally, we want to have a segmented approach to reach these different individuals that have different perceptions and concerns and potential value for these spaces. And so with that, I will thank you so much for your attention a second time.
Do we have any questions for Laura?
Yes, I'm just thinking about seems that a lot of work has already been done through almost all communities across the country in terms of behavior change for roadside plantings, and I guess I am surprised that that wasn't incorporated in the study. And like you said, reinventing the educational piece.
Okay, you may have to help me repeat this. So Laura, this information has been collected from state DOTs in the past, kind of the behavioral shift and kind of the culture of how roadsides are viewed. And so any reason why those past examples weren't incorporated into this research as well?
That's a great question. Yes, you're right. We did a massive literature review that informed both of these projects. That is part of the larger study, and that is the like the barriers and benefits that we found in the in that literature were incorporated into these instruments. So it's there. I just didn't get into it with this short presentation, but thank you for that comment.
Thank you. Any other questions for Laura?
What demographic data was collected during these surveys, and was there any significance of those characteristics to certain attitudes of these responses?
Laura, were there any demographic data collected during these surveys, and was there any significance to their attitudes based on demographics?
Oh, that's a great question. Yes, we have a ton of demographics. I don't have a lot in this presentation, and I don't want to misspeak. Let me see. We had age differences in here. Let me see that group that's already engaged, the pollinator patrons, was the youngest group. Let me see. The let me see the positive pollinator passerbys, the ones that are not interested, that was the oldest group. And let me see, like years residing in Florida, we had some differences there too. So like The group that's engaged has lived here for the shortest period of time, in addition to being the youngest. So that kind of aligns with some of what's in the literature. We do have a lot more in terms of like education and other demographics, the type of community people live in, the type of house, that sort of thing, income. But I don't want to misrepresent anything, so I will uh, not speak to that right now, but it will be in our larger reports.
Was data also collected on like Florida residency, whether they were like snowbirds coming to live seasonally for the winter, or if they're, you know, permanent residents, and then like geography as well.
Laura, back to the demographics, was there data collected on whether or not they were permanent residents or maybe just, you know, were snowbirds? I'm doing air quotes, you can't see that. And then also like geography within Florida.
Yeah, so we do have whether they're full-time residents, whether they live here part-time more than half the year and part-time less than half the year. And I don't have that in this presentation, but we have them down to their zip code, and some of what we have done looks at if they live in more urban or more rural areas of the state, which I haven't run this yet, but I want to connect it to like how much driving they do to kind of recreate the journeys they take. But we have so much more data that we know what to do with. We do have a lot of that in here.
Thought I saw a question.
I was curious if you got any more in-depth reasoning behind most people were concerned about having pollinator habitat either over or under utility lines.
Laura, do you have any more information on why people were concerned or not concerned with the pollinator habitat under power lines?
No, and I'd really like to follow some of this up with some qualitative research to like really understand what people are thinking. But that item came from other research from other parts of the country, and I couldn't tell you where that one came from in particular, but that was a concern that others have identified in the past. So yeah, it is not a direct connection in my mind either.
Okay, any other questions for Laura? All right.